everyone, for another episode of the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. We are a week into WCC play, a little bit of the status quo. Before we get any further, be sure to hit that subscribe button on YouTube and a like and favorite on your favorite streaming service. Follow along on social media at Post by Zach and all of that. We're 1 week in, and to this point, we have a lot of the status quo. A lot of what we thought would happen has happened. Gonzaga, St. Mary's, Santa Clara are all 2-0. USF is 1-0. Portland gets their opener at 1-0, and everyone else is sitting at 0-2. So we do have a little bit of kind of like the haves and the have-nots in the WCC to this point. But honestly, this is kind of what we were expecting to this point. I'll talk about the nail biter that USF did have, even though they did pick up their win this past week. San Diego ended up being a little more intriguing. They did have 10 wins in the non-conference, and we'll talk more about their week, even though they ended up 0-2. Some interesting things out of San Diego. But we're going to start with St. Mary's, and the St. Mary's team went 2-0. They got road wins against San Diego and LMU. Both had sort of stressful endings. LMU, a definite stressful ending. The San Diego one, St. Mary's did start to pull away in the second half, but as San Diego has done a number of times this year, they stormed back in that game and at least made it interesting toward the end. But what we saw from St. Mary's this week was maybe encouraging moving forward to what we might see the rest of conference. So in that San Diego game, the thing that jumps out, the thing that really was a hint of maybe they are almost back, maybe they are close to being that team again, was the fact that Aidan Mahaney had an Aidan Mahaney-like game. He was 8 for 11 from the field, 25 points, 6 assists, 4 for 7 from 3. This looked like the Aidan Mahaney we saw a year ago. And so often we see that conference play can almost be a great reset button for a lot of these guys. And it looks like maybe, just maybe, that was the case for Mahaney in that opener against the Toreros, because he was able to really break out and be the guy we all expected to see going into the year. Augustas Marciulionis continued his strong play. He had 16 points and 10 assists, his first career double-double. And his shooting has continued to be one of the highlights of what St. Mary's has seen over the last month. He was 5 for 8 from the field. Luke Barrett, another really strong game. He was the player of the week a year ago. He had 14 more points, 7 rebounds in the San Diego game. And what we also saw in that contest was the St. Mary's offense looking like the offense we thought we would see going into the season. They shot 52% from the field. They shot 40% from 3. They had 21 assists on 27 field goals. They scored 27 points on 19 turnovers. That was the St. Mary's team I think at least myself, thought we would see more often than we have to this point. And was definitely feeling really good about that one, but that was holding out, not caution, but definitely a pause on getting too excited because of LMU 2 nights later. An LMU team that did beat St. Mary's in Gersten Pavilion a year ago. So that was one where I was like, I didn't want to go too far. Didn't want to lean too hard into, oh, they're back. Oh, they're this, they're that. They ended up winning that LMU game 68-64. LMU played really, really well in this game. I thought they played really well defensively. Held St. Mary's to 38% from the field, 18% from 3. Augustas Marciulionis was the guy for St. Mary's in this one. He had 22 points, 3 assists. Mahaney did have 14 points in this one. He didn't shoot all that well, but there were moments where you saw the killer. You saw the guy who was one of those on the short list to be WCC Player of the Year. You saw that guy a few times in that game against LMU. This was a game where St. Mary's really took advantage of what they do best. They pounded it in the paint. They took advantage of second chance points. 12-5 on second chance points, 14 offensive rebounds. This is where St. Mary's has been making their money night in, night out, has been on the glass. And this game was a lot like the UNLV game just a few weeks ago. Mahaney had 4 fouls with 9 minutes left. Saxon ended up fouling out with about 3 minutes left to go. And every time St. Mary's looked like they might pull away, LMU punched right back. LMU had leads late in this contest, but St. Mary's would fire back. Will Johnston for LMU, I had him on my watch list. I had him like you can't fall asleep against him. He had 19 points against St. Mary's. Justin Wright and Dom Harris both had 11. And for St. Mary's, again, they're off to a really good start in conference play. They're 2-0. They're going to have tougher tests this week because they do see Santa Clara on Saturday, but they do start off with they're heading back home for Portland. When we talked about St. Mary's I think it's 4 of their first 5 conference games are on the road. They've already knocked off the first 2. They'll be back in Moraga on Thursday and then back on the road on Saturday to take on the Broncos. For LMU, this was it felt like that they ran into 2 teams that have just to this point been playing better basketball, and LMU's inconsistencies hurt them late in these contests. At least like in their first game, Santa Clara kind of like controlled that contest, especially in the second half for most of the game, never really let LMU get too close. And that St. Mary's game, that was maybe one of the better outings that the Lions have had all year long. That looked like the team we thought we would see most of the year from LMU. Again, I've mentioned a lot that the WCC overall, this non-conference has been a poor showing for the conference as a whole, and that goes up and down the roster, whether that's Gonzaga or St. Mary's or USF, or it hasn't been great. Like there hasn't been those marquee wins, and LMU, that was a game, that was an opportunity where that they could have had that win from times, and they did have a shot toward with 2 seconds to go. Dom Harris did have a lean to the basket and ended up losing control, lost the basketball out of bounds, and just missed opportunities for the Lions in that one. We'll get to LMU a little bit later. But one of the things I just wanted to kind of touch on, because going back to San Diego did lose that game against St. Mary's 82-71, and then they went up to Spokane and lost 101-74. The scores don't look good. Especially the Gonzaga one looks so lopsided. But I want to take a deeper look at this and take a step back, because watching San Diego play, watching their energy, watching how much they scramble and whatnot, and they're still largely a work in progress. This San Diego team is incredibly young. They had 11 newcomers coming into the year. Talked about their soft schedule, but hey, they also started picking up. They ended up 10-5 in the non-conference. They beat Arizona State. They did some good things in those games before we got to league play, and they started off league play with probably the 2 worst opponents you could think of when you're trying to build some confidence in WCC play. You get the 2 best arguably the 2 best defensive teams in the league, the 2 best teams in the league overall. They turned the ball over 19 times against St. Mary's. So it's actually, think about it this way, because a lot of times you think about all right, what did they do wrong? Did they not shoot well? Did they not rebound well? Did they not What did they not do that really was preventing them from really getting over the hump in these contests? One word: turnovers. I mentioned they had 19 turnovers against St. Mary's. St. Mary's scored 27 points off those 19 turnovers. The turnover margin for San Diego was minus 14. They lost the game by 11. 2 nights later against Gonzaga, 19 turnovers. Gonzaga scored 27 points off those 19 turnovers. The points off turnover margin in that one, minus 21. They lost the game by 27. Just cleaning up the turnovers would have completely changed the game for San Diego in both these contests. And again, against these two teams, that makes more sense of why they were they were sloppier with the ball. It looked like they were rushing a bit too often. It looked like they didn't have the patience. Very, very indicative of a younger team that just doesn't know how to handle those pressure situations against two veteran teams who know how to win ball games, especially late. Because they had two of their better shooting nights. They shot 47% against St. Mary's. They shot 43% against Gonzaga. Deuce Turner was a one-man wrecking crew in both these games. He had 34 against St. Mary's. I think it was 20 in the first half of that. No, 26 in the first half of that one. I'd have to double check. And he had 24 more in the game against Gonzaga. So Deuce Turner has, in the two WCC games, absolutely lit it up. And yeah, for the most part, he's been the only option, the only consistent option, I should say, that San Diego has had on the offensive end. But he took it to two of the best defensive teams in the league and shot 57% from the field, averaged 29 points per game, shot 57% from three. He was absolutely unstoppable on his own. And he was a little heavy on the turnover total against Gonzaga, but you could see where San Diego can just circle one item, at least this past week, and say, if we can do this better, we're going to fare a lot better the rest of conference play. And San Diego is getting no help this week when it comes to that, because we talked about they had to face Gonzaga, they had to face St. Mary's first, and they had to face Gonzaga next. Guess who they have right after this one? It's USF. So they're arguably getting the 1, 2, and 3 teams in the WCC in the first 3 games, and the 3 best defensive teams, by far the 3 best defensive teams in the league, right off the bat. We'll get a little easier for San Diego, as they do have Pepperdine on Saturday, but I think there's a lot of promise to the San Diego team. I really like what Kevin Patton Jr. brings. I really like what we've gotten to see from PJ Hayes. There's promise to the San Diego team. Very young, very raw, a lot of growth left to do. I don't expect San Diego to. I mean, I think I had them. Where did I put them? 6th, I think, in my revised standings, and or at 6th or 7th. The San Diego team could sneak up on somebody and catch someone off guard. I don't think that that's out of the question. Could they sneak up and snatch one from USF? They might be able to. Could they do it to Santa Clara? Maybe. Could they do it to LMU? Yeah, I think they could. And on a consistency front, the San Diego team has looked far better than the other teams that are right there on the bottom half of the league with them. Pepperdine, Portland, Pacific, and not LMU. LMU is still at the top. San Diego's that 4th team I was thinking of. But I think there's a lot of promise for the San Diego team. You can't completely dismiss them right now, because they've played well and they're moving forward, and the toughest part of their schedule will be over with by Thursday. And that brings me to Gonzaga. San Diego, I thought, did play relatively well early on, and then Gonzaga did what Gonzaga does. They picked up that 101-74 win against San Diego. They also had an 86-60 win against Pepperdine. They had probably overall the easiest of the schedule going into week 1, and they handled their business like they're supposed to. And the one thing I thought that this was an opportunity to have is that to get some of your offense straightened out, get your guys some confidence going into the rest of WCC play. And I think we got to see that. Graham Ike had a really, really good week. He averaged 19.5 points per game, 7.5 rebounds, shot 72% from the field, was incredibly effective against both squads. Ryan Nembhard found his shot again. He overall on the week, he was 6 for 8 from 3. He hadn't hit a 3 in almost a month. So that was really good to see that Ryan Nembhard was starting to get a little bit more confidence in that shot and get some good looks, because a lot of times he was getting the looks, they just weren't going down. And this past week, they finally started to fall. It was also nice to see that you saw the bench start to get a few more minutes in these two contests, because they were able to get up by so much and take some of the pressure off of the starters, especially Nembhard and Nolan Hickman, because those two have been carrying such a heavy load through the first couple months of the season. And it's going to be important for Gonzaga to have other options down the road, because what if one of them gets in foul trouble? What if you have to run a little bit more? If you run into a team that is a little bit more guard heavy, and you have to actually need a little bit more depth and need some help on that front. But overall, I mean, Gonzaga shot the 3 a lot better in the last couple of games too. That has been a continuous struggle for the Zags so far this year, outside of Nolan Hickman. They shot 42% from field against Pepperdine, 43% against San Diego. This was their second and third highest totals of the season from 3-point range. So this was a good outing, good week for the Zags. Really got to kind of reset themselves, coming out of that San Diego State loss and doing that at home, no less. Jun Sekyo, he also got a good fair amount of minutes, 12 minutes, 15 minutes in the 2 games. I think that's a good sign for him to get, again, more minutes, more experience, more playing time. That's only going to help Gonzaga down the road. Because, again, you want Dusty Stromer to be carrying such the heavy load either. He also has been just like someone that has been relied upon heavily these first couple months. And while I think we all agree that he has a ton of upside. He's going to be one of the better WCC players for a long, long time. But that's not his role right now, is to kind of fill a lot of the gaps. And right now it's like he every so often does make some of those freshman mistakes, and we've seen him get in foul trouble. We've seen him just not shoot well. We've seen him end up, at least even for one game, end up in Mark Few's doghouse because he picked up a technical. But for all of what we saw, like, Gonzaga looked like the team we all expected them to be once they got to league play. They do have the first 5 games we talked about, they're going to get San Diego twice, they're going to get Pepperdine twice in these first 5. So Gonzaga's going to get pretty healthy, I think they're going to have plenty of opportunity to get right before they really start to dive into the meat of conference play. However, one of said games that has been circled on the calendar for a long time, especially if you are in the South Bay, has been Gonzaga at Santa Clara, which is this Thursday at the Levy Center. And this Santa Clara team is one of the teams who is capable of beating Gonzaga. They played pretty well this past week. They won their last 2 games at LMU, at Pepperdine, so they had a couple of road games to really test them before they head back home. Their first set of back-to-back wins since the middle of November. Adama Ball looks like he's going to be a problem throughout the course of conference play. He had 21 against LMU, 28 against Pepperdine. Johnny O'Neal was really clutch late in the Pepperdine game. Brenton Napper, he's actually been the sophomore guard has been the team high in rebounds the last couple games. So Santa Clara is playing well right now, and that's obviously good going into the game against Gonzaga. And they are one of the teams I think can beat the Zags. I think they're one of the teams who potentially could win it all in Vegas. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion this year that it is either going to be St. Mary's or Gonzaga. And I've watched a lot of WCC basketball over the years. I've seen these teams play, and usually the key to it all is who has, and in many cases, it's true of the NCAA tournament, true of most of basketball in general. If you have the best guard, you are going to be a problem in every game. And I think that's true of Santa Clara. I think they have the best guard, maybe in the WCC. I think that highly of Adama Ball and what he's done to this point, because you can see that he has all the tools. He has the size, he has the length, he's producing at a high level on the offensive end. He's capable of taking over a game, and there's not a whole lot of guys in the WCC who are going to be able to play the type of defense that's going to actually bother him. And I think that's one of the challenges that all these WCC teams are going to face. And that first off is going to be with Gonzaga this week. So just thinking about that, but also this is one of the few teams, Santa Clara, that can match Gonzaga for size. And they have 2 7-footers. Gonzaga has some size. Now, obviously, we know like that they run the 4 set of E.K. Watson, Greg, and I'm blanking on Braden Huff. Duh. With those 4, Santa Clara brings Christoph Tilley. They bring Cameron Tongue. They bring Johnny O'Neal. They'll bring Francisco Cafaro. Like, they also bring a lot of size. So this is going to be one of the better challenges for Gonzaga on that front, because size for size, Gonzaga, Santa Clara can match. Now, can they match on the athleticism? We'll see. But this isn't going to be a team that Gonzaga can just push over like they could size-wise against San Diego, size-wise against Pepperdine. This is a much larger team up and down their roster. Again, think about it like that. Adama Ball is there too. He's 6'7". It feels like that's going to be a Dusty Stromer assignment, and that for a freshman, that is going to be a tough assignment for him if that is how they're going to mix and match the rotations for the Zags. So when I'm looking at this, I'm thinking about a few things as far as like that are going to be keys. So we're talking about like matchups. You can go deeper into that and everything else, but the keys for both of these teams, like, so for Gonzaga, it feels like you can't have an over-reliance on the 3. And we saw that from time to time this season. We saw that in the Purdue game. We saw just just relying upon it too much, and that ended up costing the Zags partly in that game. And Zach Edey just being an absolute load to be able to handle was the other. But it's also chasing Santa Clara off that 3-point line. Santa Clara is the best 3-point shooting team in the WCC, and they have 3-point shooters all up and down that that roster. Again, talk about what the size that Santa Clara brings. Johnny O'Neal is one of their better 3-point shooters, and he's 6'10". So much like Gonzaga with Ben Gregg or with Braden Huff, they also have big guys who can shoot from the outside, which is not something that many teams see very often, which is why that both these teams can create some matchup problems. And then for Santa Clara, to me, it's the interior defense and it's the rebounding. Gonzaga is the second best offensive rebounding team in the WCC right now. You have to limit their second chances because we know Anton Watson's going to be getting after. We know Ben Gregg's going to be getting after. And EK has been playing much better over the last couple of weeks. It really feels like he's gotten comfortable in that system at this point. And that's going to be something that Santa Clara has to be keyed in on, because while they've actually been really good on the rebounding front as well. It's like their margin isn't the best. Gonzaga's is one of the better rebounding margin teams in the WCC next to St. Mary's. Another key for Santa Clara, to me, is to get Carlos Marshall going early, because that is what we have seen in a lot of the games in which Santa Clara has been able to really jump out and capture a lead and then hold on, is Carlos Marshall really becoming that aggressor early on in contests. The more aggressive he is and the more successful he is early on, the better Santa Clara's chances are, because then that alleviates some of the pressure off of Adama Ball. It takes some of the pressure off of Brenton Napper. It takes some of the pressure off of everybody else on that roster to see that somebody's got it going early, because sometimes it does take this team a little bit of time to really rev up. So this matchup, to me, has been one of the more fascinating ones as I thought about it going into the year, thought about it going in before the season, going into WCC play. This, I think, is a good test and it's going to be a measuring stick, I think, for both teams. If Gonzaga does come out of this in a close contest, I think it shows. Let me back up instead of going there. If Santa Clara wins this, I think it shows to everybody that the league is actually wide open. If Gonzaga loses at Santa Clara, this is the sign that the league is there for the taking for Santa Clara. The league is there for the taking for USF. The league is there for the taking for St. Mary's. Obviously, one game does not change that much for Gonzaga, but I do think it opens the door. And kind of one of those things of, you don't want to give anyone confidence, like a team on the road, you don't want to give them enough confidence to think that they can win. Similar idea here. You lose that game, I don't think you want to give a team like Santa Clara the confidence that they can do it, because it feels like if they know they can do it, then they are going to pick up steam and start to really roll in conference play. And I think it also then gives a blueprint for USF, for St. Mary's, to look at of, can they duplicate, can they replicate the successes that they had against Gonzaga? For Gonzaga, if they go in and absolutely just stomp on the Broncos in this one, I think it's going to be a sobering reminder to everybody else in the WCC that the road to the tournament, the road to the NCAA tournament, to a WCC championship, still goes through Spokane. And that is, especially if it happens to Santa Clara, happening to San Diego, happening to Pepperdine, I don't think moves the needle all that much. You do it to Santa Clara this year, when there might be some doubt about Gonzaga's, not viability, but Gonzaga's depth, and are they teetering? If they just smack Santa Clara this week, I think it will remind everybody that they're still Gonzaga. They still are the 1-2 beat in the league. Now, if Gonzaga wins a close one, much like last year, I think it does two things. One, I think it does give Santa Clara a little bit of confidence that, okay, a few more adjustments and maybe we're there. And it might throw up a little bit of maybe Gonzaga can be beaten. But at the same time, I think it also then becomes a little bit of it becomes a note for Gonzaga to say, we still have a lot of work to do. We still need to fix this, this, and this, whatever those this, and this are, because it's clear that we're not separated all that much from these other WCC teams, especially if it's Santa Clara, who, as they've kind of gone up and down throughout this course of this year, they're that 3-4 range right now. At least that's where I would have them. So I think there's a lot that's going to come out of this game on Thursday. A lot of implications that can come out in various scenarios. I mean, now the whole flip of like if Santa Clara somehow blows out Gonzaga, which I don't think is happening. That's not even on my radar as an option. I think it's I think it is a giant uh-oh on both sides. If you're looking at that and Santa Clara somehow blows out Gonzaga, if you're the rest of the league, now you're like, uh-oh, Santa Clara is going to be a real problem. And if you're Gonzaga and that happens, it might be red flag time. Because that hasn't happened. I mean, a loss at Santa Clara hasn't happened in so long that even just a close one is more the shocker. And if a blowout happened, ooh, that'd be rough. Now for Santa Clara in general, this is a tough week no matter what. Like even if they get by Gonzaga somehow, they have St. Mary's on Saturday. And both of these teams, Gonzaga and St. Mary's, are just going to wear Santa Clara out. It's almost, to an extent, it's almost a good thing that they have them in this order because of the just style of play. With Gonzaga, you can run up and down, and that's going to be their style. It's going to be more up tempo. It's going to be a little more flowing in that course of that game. Even if Gonzaga is going to really press you and really do a good job defensively, that's still going to, there's a flow to the game, which I think which to me feels like it's easier to recover from than what you're going to see on Saturday with a St. Mary's team that's going to drag you out through the mud and just make this as ugly as they possibly can. And those games feel like they wear on you more, that they're harder to recover from. And with these two back-to-back, the clash of styles that Santa Clara is going to have to see, I have a hard time believing that Santa Clara could win both of these contests. I think they could take one of them if all things go right. The St. Mary's one presents completely different issues. For them, it's really keen on the rebounding and the second chance points. Because if you thought that's an issue against Gonzaga, it's going to be even worse against St. Mary's. Because that is how St. Mary's has been able to be as successful as they've been to this point, is rebounding, their offensive rebounding. Mitchell Saxon has been a huge part of that. And then now you're looking at also just the improvements upon Augustus Marshallonis and what he has meant, Joshua Jefferson and what he has meant. Luke Barrett has been a really key player, guy off the bench over the last month or so. And then what may have happened in the last week has Aidan Mahaney woken up, which if you're anyone in the WCC and the idea Aidan Mahaney has woken up should terrify you. Because if he has flipped the switch, if he is going to start playing like the guy we all thought he would be, this St. Mary's team becomes incredibly dangerous. All right. So next we're going to go back to Thursday, and we're going to talk about USF. Because USF did win their first game of WCC play. Definitely not in the fashion I don't think that anybody thought it would happen, because it went down to the wire on the road against Pacific. They needed 5 points in the last minute from Jonathan Mobo to send it to overtime. Pacific had its best offensive night maybe of the entire season. USF just could not get the offense going. They played a little out of control. They looked rushed. Lasound Hallams had 25 points for Pacific. Mo Odom had 17 points. He had finished with 19 points, 10 assists. Pacific was doing everything well. I think this was overall their best game of the season. And USF took every punch, took every blow that they could take from the Tigers, and somehow, some way, did end up with a 92-88 victory in overtime. Jonathan Mobo, I've been saying for a while, I think he should be the front runner early on. Again, it's only the first week of WCC play, but he looks like the WCC player of the year. He had 22 points and 14 rebounds in regulation. He finished with 30 points, 18 rebounds. He was 10 for 10 from the free throw line, 10 for 13 from the field. He is just doing it all for USF. He's the go-to guy. He cleans everything up. He gets to every loose ball, and he's incredibly efficient on the offensive end. And he might be the best defender in the league as well. It's like it's really hard to kind of like encapsulate everything that he has actually meant for this squad. He might be he might be my favorite player in the league right now, because he's so much fun to watch play as well. And that kind of really bailed USF out in this one. Pacific shot 49% from the field, which is the highest allowed by USF all year. Pacific scored 88 points, which was their highest total of the season. And you know what? Sometimes it's one of those games, like, it's survive and advance. Because it's conference play, and these things do happen from time to time, that a team that shouldn't be in the conversation somehow just tests you in a way you didn't expect. Keep in mind, San Diego almost beat St. Mary's last year at Jenny Craig Pavilion. A much better St. Mary's team than I wouldn't say much better, but definitely a better St. Mary's team than the one we have seen to this point this year, and a much worse San Diego team than what we saw, than what we've seen this year. And San Diego almost won that game a year ago. These things happen. Pacific almost beat Gonzaga last year. Remember that? Like, they walked into the Spanos Center, and Gonzaga almost lost. So you can't read too much into something like this. Now, I think if they had lost, you can definitely read way more into that. But the fact that they were able to pull out this win, and just kind of like catch release, like, all right, we've done that one, we've moved on. It was their only game of the week. They're able to reset going into this one, where they do have two opponents where these should be wins for USF, but you can't sleep on these two. They are going to be at San Diego, who we've already talked about, who I think is playing they are playing better than I thought that they would be at this point, and they do have some confidence right now. It does feel like that they're almost too young to know what they don't know. and it's playing to their benefit at the moment. And then USF will wrap up the week against Portland back at War Memorial at the Sobrato Center. So that's kind of where we are with USF. There's not too much to read into it. Like, I think they are set up well to end up probably, I think they're set up well to maybe be 4-0 before they see St. Mary's on the 20th in a couple of Saturdays. And looking at the rest of the calendar for this WCC week, this is Santa Clara week. Like this, they have Gonzaga, they have St. Mary's, they're hosting them both at home. Those are definitely the key matchups. But that USF San Diego game, I'm circling it because it feels like a trap game. And maybe USF will avoid the trap game because the trap game was almost last week. But I would keep an eye on that one because San Diego just feels like a team that is going to catch someone off guard, not paying attention, and be able to steal one. And we know for USF, it's critical not to have that happen. But San Diego could very well play spoiler this week. All right, well, that'll do it for this episode of the Unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. Again, be sure to hit the subscribe button. Be sure to like and favorite on your favorite streaming service. Follow me on social media at Posts by Zach. Also follow the podcast on Twitter at UnoffWCCPod. All right, and with that, that'll do it. Have a great week, everybody, and I will catch you later.